Some stories begin with a fairy tale, but this one begins with a lawsuit. It starts on the cold, unforgiving steps of the New York County Supreme Court with a young woman whose shoes were worth less than the marble they stood on. She had no lawyer, no money, and no allies, just a belief in the truth so fierce it was all she had left. By sunset, she would be headline news. This is the story of Alice Rowe, a woman who walked into a lion's den armed with nothing but her own mind and walked out with a future she could never have imagined. It's a story about how justice, in the rarest of moments, isn't blind, it's just waiting for the right person to open its eyes. The summons had felt less like paper and more like a block of concrete in Alice Rowe's hands. Dated 3 months prior, its edges were now soft and frayed from the number of times she had read it, dissected it, and used it as a coaster for cups of bitter black coffee during sleepless nights. Alice Rowe versus Innovatech Solutions, Inc. It looked like a typo, a cruel joke. Her name plain and simple next to a corporate monolith that had its own zip code and a legal department larger than her hometown's entire population. Alice lived on the 5th floor of a walk-up in a part of Brooklyn that real estate agents generously called up and coming. Her apartment was a testament to a life put on hold. Boxes of books she hadn't had time to unpack served as end tables. The only art on the wall was a framed print of her final project from university, a complex data visualization that was both beautiful and to the layperson completely incomprehensible. It was a map of her own mind, a mind that Innovatech Solutions had plundered and claimed as their own. She had been their brightest junior coder. Recruited straight out of a top-tier engineering program, she was promised mentorship, innovation, and a chance to work on their flagship project, Prometheus. For a year, she poured everything into it. Not just her time from 7 a.m. to midnight most days, but her very soul. The breakthrough came not in the sterile glass-walled office, but at 3 a.m. in her tiny apartment, fueled by cheap noodles and a flash of genuine inspiration. She developed a predictive analytics algorithm codenamed Cassandra that was light years ahead of anything on the market. It could anticipate market fluctuations with an astonishing 94% accuracy. It was her life's work condensed into 800 elegant lines of code. She presented it to her boss, Gregory Finch, a man whose smile never quite reached his cold, calculating eyes. He had praised her, called her a visionary, and promised her a promotion and a significant bonus. 2 weeks later, her keycard stopped working. An email from HR citing corporate restructuring and performance redundancies was her only severance. A month after that, Innovatech announced Prometheus 2.0 with a new revolutionary predictive engine at its core. Her engine, her Cassandra. Rage was the first emotion, a white-hot fire that consumed her. But rage doesn't pay rent. She contacted lawyers. The first 3 laughed her out of their offices. "You signed an employment agreement, Ms. Rowe," one had said, pointing to the fine print. "Everything you create on their time with their resources belongs to them." "But I created it here," she had argued, gesturing wildly around her apartment. "On my own time, on my own machine." "Can you prove it?" He'd asked, a bored look on his face. She could. She had version control logs, time-stamped commits on a private server, and digital breadcrumbs that any competent forensic analyst could follow. The problem was competent forensic analysts cost a fortune. The lawyers who believed her wanted a retainer she couldn't afford. The cheapest one quoted her $50,000 a sum as astronomical to her as the national debt. So she did the only thing she could. She filed the lawsuit herself, pro se. A lamb petitioning a pack of wolves. For months she lived in the public law library devouring books on intellectual property law, civil procedure, and courtroom etiquette. She learned about discovery motions and subpoenas. She wrote her own briefs, her fingers stained with ink, and her mind buzzing with legalese. She sold her car, her grandmother's jewelry, and her collection of rare textbooks. Every dollar went towards filing fees and printing costs. Her friends told her she was crazy. Her parents begged her to give up and come home. But giving up meant letting Gregory Finch win. It meant accepting that her mind, the only thing she truly owned, could be stolen without consequence. Now the day had come. She stood before the courthouse, a monolithic temple of justice on Center Street. People in tailored suits carrying expensive leather briefcases swept past her without a second glance. They belonged here. She was an intruder. She wore her only suit, a charcoal gray outfit she'd bought for her university graduation. It was a little too tight in the shoulders, now a result of stress-induced weight loss. Her shoes were scuffed at the toes. In her worn tote bag was her laptop and a single, perfectly organized binder, its tabs labeled Exhibit A, Exhibit B, Exhibit C. Inside was her entire life code repositories, email chain server logs. Her truth bound in 3 rings. Taking a deep breath that did little to calm the frantic drumming in her chest, Alice Rowe pushed open the heavy bronze doors. She was alone. She was terrified. But as she walked into the echoing marble hall, a single thought solidified in her mind, turning her fear into steel. They had taken her job, her code, and her money. They would not take her voice. Courtroom 21B was designed to intimidate. The walls were paneled in dark, solemn mahogany, and the ceilings were so high they seemed to gather shadows. The judge's bench was an elevated fortress of polished wood from which Justice Marian Albright, a woman with a reputation for her piercing intellect and complete lack of patience for frivolous arguments, presided like a hawk. Alice found her table, the one designated for the plaintiff. It felt miles away from the judge. Across the aisle, the defense table was a hive of activity. 3 lawyers from the prestigious firm of Cromwell and Sterling were arranging stacks of documents. They moved with a synchronized, effortless confidence that made Alice's stomach clench. At their head was Arthur Davies, a senior partner known for his silver tongue and merciless cross-examinations. He had hair the color of steel and eyes that seemed to assess every person he looked at for weaknesses. He glanced at Alice, a flicker of something between pity and contempt in his eyes, before turning back to his team. In the gallery behind them sat Gregory Finch. He looked relaxed, almost bored, chatting quietly with his chief technology officer. He hadn't even bothered to look in her direction. To him, she was not a person. She was a nuisance, a minor operational cost to be handled by his lawyers and then forgotten. That casual dismissal stung more than any legal threat. The clerk called the case. Docket number 784B, Rowe versus Innovatech Solutions. Alice's heart hammered against her ribs. She stood her knees, trembling slightly, and smoothed down her jacket. Alice Rowe, Your Honor, appearing pro se. Her voice was shakier than she wanted. Arthur Davies rose smoothly. Arthur Davies of Cromwell and Sterling for the defendant, Innovatech Solutions, Your Honor. His voice was a rich baritone that filled the room. The proceedings began, and Alice was immediately plunged into a world she had only read about. Davies began with a motion to dismiss his arguments, a torrent of case law and legal jargon. He painted Alice as a disgruntled former employee, a mediocre coder launching a baseless, vindictive lawsuit as a shakedown for a settlement. He argued that her evidence was circumstantial, her claims unsubstantiated, and the entire case a waste of the court's valuable time. When it was her turn, Alice took a breath and walked to the lectern. She began her opening statement, her voice gaining strength as she spoke not of legal theory, but of her work. She described the Cassandra algorithm, the passion she had poured into it the moment of its creation. She tried to explain the beauty of its logic, the intricate dance of data and prediction. Mr. Davies claims this is about money, she said, her voice clear and direct. But it isn't. It's about creation. It's about the fact that an idea, a unique string of logic born in the mind of a person, is property. It is as real as a house or a car, and Innovatech Solutions stole it. Judge Albright listened, her face impassive. Alice presented her first exhibits, the time-stamped files from her personal server showing the code's creation and evolution months before Innovatech claimed their engine was developed. Davies's cross-examination was brutal. He didn't attack her facts directly. Instead, he attacked her credibility and her expertise. Ms. Rowe, you are not a forensic data analyst, are you? No, I'm a software developer. So you have no formal training in verifying the authenticity of server logs against potential tampering. I know my own work and my own. Just a yes or no, Ms. Rowe. You have no formal training. No. And you are not a patent attorney, correct? No. You have never brought a product to market, have you? You have no experience in the commercial application of software at this scale. I was a junior developer. That was supposed to be the next step. So no experience. Thank you. He turned to the judge. Your Honor, what we have here is a junior employee who wildly overestimates the significance of a piece of student-level code, which she developed using the concepts and proprietary frameworks she was exposed to at Innovatech. He made her feel small, foolish, and naive. The jury, a panel of ordinary citizens, looked confused by the technical details and swayed by Davies's commanding presence. Alice felt like she was drowning. Unbeknownst to her, a man in the back row of the gallery was watching the proceedings with an unusual intensity. He hadn't intended to be there. Alistair Sterling, the reclusive billionaire founder and CEO of Sterling Dynamics, was only in the courthouse to finalize a tedious zoning appeal for a new research campus his company was building upstate. His case had been postponed, and out of sheer boredom he had slipped into the back of a random courtroom to pass the time. At first he'd been ready to leave. A typical corporate dispute. But then Alice had started talking about her algorithm. She used phrases like Bayesian filtering, neural network pruning, and nonlinear data clustering. It wasn't the rambling of a disgruntled amateur. It was the precise language of a high-level architect. Alistair, who had written his first commercial code at age 16 and built his empire on a revolutionary processing chip, recognized it immediately. He saw past the cheap suit and the nervous tremor in her voice. He saw a brilliant mind at work. He listened as Davies twisted her words and belittled her accomplishments. He looked over at Gregory Finch, a man he knew by reputation. Finch was a vulture, a market consolidator who bought innovative startups and gutted them for their IP, leaving a trail of broken companies and betrayed founders. Alistair despised men like him. He watched Alice's shoulders slump as the judge called for a 15-minute recess. He saw the flicker of despair in her eyes as her dream of justice seemed to be crumbling into dust under the weight of corporate power. The army of lawyers from Cromwell and Sterling was going to bury her. And in that moment, Alistair Sterling, a man who hadn't been interested in anything but his work in over a decade, found himself utterly captivated. He felt an old forgotten spark of anger against the kind of injustice he'd fought against his entire career. He stood up. He had to talk to her. The hallway outside Courtroom 21B was a sterile, impersonal space, but for Alice it felt like the loneliest place on earth. The confident click-clack of the Innovatech legal team's shoes echoed down the corridor as they headed off presumably to a catered lunch. Alice leaned against the cool marble wall, closing her eyes. The humiliation was a physical ache in her chest. Davies hadn't just questioned her case. He had questioned her entire professional worth. He had taken her life's best work and dismissed it as a student-level project. She fumbled in her bag for a bottle of water, her hands still shaking. She had one last chance after the recess to present her final evidence, but what was the point? Davies had already framed her as an unreliable narrator. She was outmatched, outmaneuvered, and utterly exhausted. He's using a classic misdirection strategy. The voice was low and calm, startling her. She opened her eyes to see a man standing a few feet away. He was tall and lean, dressed in a simple but exquisitely tailored dark gray suit with no tie. He wasn't handsome in a conventional movie star way. His features were too sharp, his expression too intense. But there was an arresting intelligence in his deep-set eyes. She recognized him vaguely from the back of the courtroom. "I'm sorry," Alice said, confused. "Arthur Davies." The man continued, taking a small step closer. He wasn't crowding her, but his presence had a peculiar gravity. "He's not attacking your data. He knows he can't. Your server logs are almost certainly authentic. Instead, he's attacking the presenter. He's making the jury doubt you, so they'll doubt the evidence without ever having to properly analyze it." Alice stared at him, suspicion warring with a desperate need for an ally. "Who are you?" "My name is Alistair Sterling." He said it simply as if stating the time. The name meant nothing to Alice. She didn't read the business pages or follow the tech titans. "Are you a lawyer?" she asked. A faint smile touched his lips. "No, I'm an engineer, like you." He paused, his gaze sharp and analytical. "When you were describing your algorithm, you mentioned your method for reducing overfitting in the predictive model. You used a modified dropout technique, but you applied it to the feature selection stage, not just the hidden layers. Is that correct?" The question was so specific, so deeply technical, it was like a lifeline of familiarity in a sea of confusing legal jargon. It was a question a peer would ask. No lawyer, not even her own if she had one, would have grasped that nuance. "Yes," she said, her surprise cutting through her despair. "Standard dropout is too random. It can discard critical predictor variables. I wrote a script that weights the probability of a feature being ignored based on its initial correlation with the outcome. It prunes the noise without risking the signal." Alistair nodded slowly, a look of genuine appreciation on his face. "Ingenious. You've essentially automated an intuitive process that most data scientists spend months doing by hand. That's not a student project, Ms. Rowe. That's a paradigm shift." Hearing her work described that way by a stranger who clearly understood its value was like a sip of water after days in the desert. The knot of humiliation in her stomach loosened just a little. "It doesn't matter," she said, the bitterness returning. "I can't make the judge or the jury understand that. To them it's just words." "Then show them," Alistair said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "Don't tell them. You have your laptop, yes?" Alice nodded. "When the court reconvenes, don't just present your final exhibit. Request permission from the judge to perform a live demonstration." "A what?" "A live demonstration. Connect your laptop to the courtroom projector. Run your Cassandra code. Then run Innovatech's Prometheus 2.0 code side by side. I saw their source code in the evidence list you submitted. It's almost identical, but they made a few clumsy modifications. They tried to mask your signature." "My signature. Every coder has a fingerprint," Alistair explained. "A unique way of structuring loops, naming variables, commenting their work. Yours is all over their code. But there's something else. When they ported it, they misunderstood a key dependency in your original library. It creates a subtle memory leak. It's a tiny flaw, but under pressure it will cause their program to lag, to consume resources inefficiently. Your original code won't." He locked eyes with her, the intensity of his gaze unwavering. "Put them both to the test right there in front of everyone. Feed them a live, complex data stream, stock market data, anything. Let the jury see one program run with the fluid elegance you designed, and the other stutter and strain under the weight of its own stolen, misunderstood architecture. Don't let Davies define your work. You define it. Make it undeniable." The idea was audacious, theatrical, and terrifying. It was also brilliant. It bypassed the jargon and presented a clear visual and irrefutable truth, but it was a massive risk. "The judge might not allow it," Alice whispered. "Ask anyway," Alistair urged. "Judge Albright has a background in patent law. She appreciates empirical evidence. Be respectful, be confident, and frame it as the only way to truly clarify the complex technical nature of your claim." The court officer called for the recess to end. People were beginning to file back into the courtroom. Alice's mind was racing. This man, this stranger, had just handed her a sword. She didn't know who he was or why he was helping her. He could be a crank or some corporate spy trying to lead her into a trap. But looking into his eyes, she saw no deception. She saw a fierce shared understanding, the respect of one builder for another. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Because I hate thieves," Alistair Sterling said simply. "And I admire good design." He gave her a slight nod and then turned, melting back into the crowd moving into the gallery. Alice was left standing alone once more, the echo of his words ringing in her ears. She had a choice to make. Play it safe and lose, or take a wild, desperate chance on the advice of a stranger. Taking a final shaky breath, she clutched the handle of her tote bag and walked back into the lion's den. The courtroom felt colder when Alice returned. The brief flicker of hope ignited by her conversation with Alistair Sterling was already battling the chilling reality of her situation. Arthur Davies was smirking, confident he had already won. Gregory Finch was checking his watch, his impatience palpable. "Ms. Rowe, you may present your final arguments," Judge Albright said, her tone suggesting she wished to get this over with quickly. Alice walked to the lectern, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She could feel Alistair's presence somewhere behind her, a silent, unseen anchor. She took a breath. "Your Honor, before I present my final exhibit, I would like to make a formal request." Judge Albright raised an eyebrow. "A request?" "Yes, Your Honor. The core of this case rests on the unique functionality and architecture of a piece of software. Words have proven inadequate to convey the fundamental similarities and crucial differences between my creation and the defendant's product. I request the court's permission to perform a brief live demonstration of the two programs." A murmur went through the courtroom. Davies shot to his feet. "Objection! Your Honor, this is absurd. It's courtroom theatrics. This is not a tech conference. The plaintiff is not a registered expert witness. She is trying to introduce unvetted, potentially manipulated evidence in a live setting. It is highly irregular and prejudicial." "The evidence is not unvetted, Mr. Davies." Alice countered, her voice surprisingly steady. "The source code for both programs has been submitted in discovery. I am not introducing new evidence. I am merely providing a dynamic illustration of evidence already on the record. It is the most direct and truthful way to show this court who the true author of this technology is." Judge Albright leaned forward, her expression shifting from impatience to grudging curiosity. Her background in patent law made her appreciate the difficulty of demonstrating abstract concepts. "What do you propose to demonstrate exactly, Ms. Rowe?" "I will run my algorithm Cassandra and Innovatech's Prometheus 2.0 engine side by side on two identical data partitions on my laptop. I will feed both a live high-volume stream of public financial data. I contend that my original program will process the data smoothly and efficiently, while the defendant's version, due to a critical architectural flaw introduced when they copied my work, will exhibit significant performance degradation and memory leakage. It will be a visible, measurable difference." Davies scoffed. "This is a ridiculous assertion based on nothing." "Then you should have no objection to the demonstration, Mr. Davies." Judge Albright cut in, her voice sharp. "If your client's product is superior or even functional as claimed, this demonstration will only serve to strengthen your case. If Miss Rowe's claims are as baseless as you suggest, she will only succeed in embarrassing herself. I will allow it." She looked at the clerk. "Set up the projector." Davies sat down, his face a mask of fury. Gregory Finch was no longer looking at his watch. His eyes were locked on Alice, a venomous glare replacing his earlier boredom. A court officer helped Alice connect her laptop to the large screen that descended behind the witness stand. The entire courtroom, judge, jury, and lawyers watched as her desktop appeared magnified for all to see. For a moment, she felt a paralyzing wave of self-consciousness. This was it, her last shot. She opened two terminal windows, positioning them side by side. On the left, she initiated the Cassandra script. On the right, Prometheus 2.0. She then launched a third program, a data feed that began streaming real-time trades from the New York Stock Exchange. The screen filled with cascading numbers and symbols. At first, both programs seemed to perform identically. Two columns of processed output scrolled down the screen at a rapid pace. Davies allowed himself a small, smug smile. Alice's heart sank. Had Alistair been wrong? But then, after about 90 seconds of intense data processing, a subtle change began. The scroll on the right side, the Prometheus side, started to stutter. It was almost imperceptible at first. A slight hesitation. A dropped frame. The jury probably hadn't noticed it yet, but Alice did. And she knew Alistair Sterling would too. She let it run. 2 minutes. 3. The memory leak Alistair had predicted was taking its toll. The flaw in Innovatech's stolen copy was like a ghost in their machine. The stutter on the right side became a noticeable lag. The column of numbers processed by Prometheus was now visibly falling behind Cassandra's smooth, effortless stream. Alice opened a system resource monitor, displaying it in a third window. The graph was stark and damning. Cassandra's memory usage was a flat, stable line. Prometheus's was a jagged mountain climbing steadily, consuming more and more processing power as it struggled to keep up. "As you can see, Your Honor, and members of the jury," Alice said, her voice ringing with newfound confidence, "the two programs are not the same. One is a finely tuned, efficient engine. The other is a flawed copy. They made a mistake when they took my code because they didn't understand the subtlety of its design. The inefficiency you see on the right, that is the signature of a thief. It is the ghost of their misconduct, visible for all to see." The courtroom was silent. The jury was captivated, their eyes glued to the screen, watching the undeniable visual proof of one program failing while the other excelled. Arthur Davies was pale. Gregory Finch looked as if he had been struck. He was whispering furiously to his CTO, who was shaking his head, looking horrified. Judge Albright stared at the screen for a long, silent minute. She looked from the climbing graph of Prometheus's memory usage to the serene stability of Cassandra's. She looked at the panicked faces at the defense table. And then she looked at Alice Rowe, who stood alone by the lectern, her face illuminated by the glow of her own brilliant creation. "The court will adjourn until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning," the judge announced, her voice heavy with significance. "I suggest, Mr. Davies, that you and your client use the time to seriously consider your position." She banged the gavel, the sound cracking through the tense silence like a thunderclap. It was not a victory yet, but it was a seismic shift. The ground beneath Innovatech's feet had just split wide open. The moment the judge left the bench, the courtroom erupted into a low buzz. Alice felt a dizzying rush of adrenaline and relief so potent it left her lightheaded. She shakily disconnected her laptop, her hands trembling not from fear this time but from the aftershock of her gamble. She had done it. She had made them see. Before she could even pack her bag, Arthur Davies and his team descended upon her, their professional composure shattered and replaced by a thinly veiled panic. "Ms. Rowe," Davies began, his voice a low, urgent hiss, "my client is prepared to offer you a settlement, to put this whole unfortunate matter behind us." One of his junior associates held out a tablet with a document on it. $500,000, Davies said. "And, of course, a non-disclosure agreement. You walk away and this all goes away." A week ago, that sum would have seemed like a king's ransom. It would have solved all her problems, paid off her debts, and given her a fresh start. But it wasn't a week ago. Something had changed in her. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the truth. "No," Alice said, her voice quiet but firm. Davies blinked, taken aback. "I may be able to go to $750, but that is the absolute final offer. Take it, Ms. Rowe. If you refuse, we will appeal. We will bury you in litigation for the next decade. You will be old and gray before you see a penny, and we will countersue you for trade secret theft and defamation until you have nothing left." The threat was naked, vicious. "My answer is no," she repeated, looking him straight in the eye. Before Davies could retort, a calm voice cut through the tension. "I believe the lady has given you her answer, Arthur." Alistair Sterling had materialized beside Alice. He moved with a quiet authority that made the three lawyers from Cromwell and Sterling take an involuntary step back. Davies's eyes widened in recognition. "Mr. Sterling, I wasn't aware you had an interest in this case." The deference in his tone was immediate and absolute. Alistair Sterling wasn't just another wealthy man. He was a titan, a pillar of the tech world whose company Sterling Dynamics could buy and sell Innovatech before breakfast. "My interests are my own," Alistair said coolly. He turned his attention to Alice, ignoring the lawyers as if they were furniture. "Ms. Rowe, may I have a word with you, in private?" He gently guided her away from the stunned legal team and out into the now empty hallway. He led her to a quiet alcove far from any prying ears. "You were magnificent," he said, his voice laced with genuine admiration. "That was one of the most brilliant pieces of legal strategy I have ever witnessed." "It was your strategy," Alice corrected him, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Thank you." "I only pointed the way. You took the steps," he replied. "Which brings me to what happens next. They will come back with a higher offer. They'll probably offer you a few million tomorrow morning to make this disappear, but a settlement and an NDA means they still win in a way. They pay a pittance, admit no wrongdoing, and bury your technology forever, so it never competes with them. You get money, but you lose your creation." He paused, his gaze intensifying. "I have a different offer for you." He wasn't just a casual observer. Alistair's rivalry with Gregory Finch was well known in the industry's inner circles. Finch built his company by acquiring and absorbing innovators. Alistair built his by out-innovating everyone. They were philosophical opposites, and their competition was fierce. "I saw what Finch did to a small AI startup called Viridian 3 years ago," Alistair explained. "He acquired them, stole their lead engineers for a different project, and then shuttered the company, shelving their core product because it threatened one of Innovatech's legacy systems. Finch doesn't create, he consumes. I want to see him beaten, not just bought off." He leaned against the wall, his posture relaxed, but his words carrying immense weight. "Here is my proposal. Refuse any settlement. Let's go for a full judgment. I will provide you with legal representation. Not just any lawyers, but my personal counsel from Whitman, Shaw, and Garrett. They are the best IP litigators in the world. They will formally take over your case tomorrow morning. We will not only win, we will set a precedent. We will counter-sue for punitive damages, for theft of trade secrets, and for malicious prosecution." Alice was speechless. This was beyond anything she could have imagined. "What do you get out of it?" she asked, her voice cautious. This was the real world. Men like Alistair Sterling didn't operate out of pure altruism. "I'm glad you asked," he said, a flicker of approval in his eyes. "I am an investor, Ms. Rowe. I invest in talent and in disruptive technology. Your Cassandra algorithm is not just clever, it's revolutionary. It has applications in finance, logistics, medical diagnostics, dozens of fields. It's worth billions, not millions. When we win the case and you regain full and undisputed control of your intellectual property, my venture capital firm Sterling Ventures gets the first right of refusal for seed funding. We will give you the capital to build your own company with you as CEO and majority shareholder. We will provide you with lab space, resources staff, everything you need to turn Cassandra into a global force. I don't want to buy your algorithm, Ms. Rowe. I want to invest in its founder." The scope of his offer was staggering. He wasn't offering her a safety net. He was offering her an empire. He wasn't saving a damsel in distress. He was making a strategic investment in a mind he believed in. He was giving her the power she had been denied the chance to build, not just to win. It was an alliance, not a rescue. She looked at him, searching his face for any sign of a catch of a hidden agenda. She saw only a focused, determined businessman who saw an opportunity to defeat a rival, to champion a cause he believed in, and to make a fortune in the process. It was a calculated alliance of iron and gold. For months she had fought just to survive, to be heard. Now she was being offered the chance to roar. "You'll have the best lawyers in the world in your corner by morning," he said softly. "You won't be alone in there again." Alice thought of the condescending smirks of the Innovatech lawyers, of Gregory Finch's dismissive glare. She thought of her tiny apartment, her mountain of debt, and the burning, relentless belief in her own work. Alistair Sterling wasn't just offering her a way out. He was offering her a way up. "Okay," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Let's do it." A slow, genuine smile spread across Alistair's face. "Excellent. I'll make the call. Get some rest, Ms. Rowe. Tomorrow we go on the offensive." When court resumed the next morning, the atmosphere was entirely different. Alice Rowe did not walk to the plaintiff's table alone. She was flanked by two individuals who moved with the predatory grace of sharks. One was Eleanor Vance, a legendary litigator in her late 60s with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that could dissect a lie from 100 paces. The other was a sharp young man named Ben Carter, who carried a briefcase that likely cost more than Alice's rent for a year. They were from Whitman, Shaw, and Garrett. They were Alistair Sterling's personal legal guard dogs. Eleanor Vance addressed the court. Your Honor, Eleanor Vance appearing as lead counsel for the plaintiff, Ms. Alice Rowe, who will now serve as our primary expert witness. The color drained from Arthur Davies' face. He knew who Vance was. Everyone in corporate law knew. She was the lawyer you called when you didn't just want to win. You wanted to scorch the earth where your enemy stood. The game had changed, and Davies knew with a sinking feeling that he was no longer playing. He was being played. What followed was not a court case. It was a systematic dismantling. Eleanor Vance did not just present evidence. She wove a narrative of corporate greed and predatory behavior. She began by calling Innovatech's chief technology officer, the same man who had been whispering frantically with Finch during the demonstration back to the stand. With surgical precision, Vance walked him through the source code of Prometheus 2.0. She didn't ask his opinion. She stated facts and forced him to confirm them. Is it not true, Mr. Henderson, that the variable naming convention in this section of code alpha node beta weight gamma decay is identical to the convention used in Ms. Rowe's original source code, which you claim your team never saw? It's a common convention, Henderson stammered. Is it common for it to be used in conjunction with a commenting style that uses a double / followed by a 4-digit date code, which by a remarkable coincidence is also Ms. Rowe's unique signature and appears nowhere else in Innovatech's entire codebase? Yes or no? No. Vance moved on to the memory leak. Yesterday we witnessed a significant performance degradation in your product. Were you aware of this flaw prior to the demonstration? We are constantly working to optimize. Were you aware of this specific flaw, Mr. Henderson? Vance's voice was like ice. There were some performance flags in beta testing. So you knew the product you launched was defective. It went on like this for an hour. Vance cornered him, trapped him, and left his credibility in tatters. By the time he stepped down, he looked like a man who had aged 10 years. But Vance was just getting started. Alistair's resources had been deployed overnight. His forensic accounting team had been digging into Innovatech. His corporate intelligence unit had been quietly reaching out to former employees. Just before lunch, they had their breakthrough. The plaintiff calls a rebuttal witness, Eleanor Vance announced. Mr. David Chen. A nervous-looking man in his late 20s walked to the stand. He was a former junior developer at Innovatech, one of Alice's former colleagues. Alistair's team had discovered he'd been fired 3 months after Alice for raising ethical concerns with HR. With the full legal protection offered by Alistair's firm, he was now ready to talk. Vance had him authenticate a series of emails. The courtroom projector once again lit up, but this time it displayed an email chain between Gregory Finch and the head of R&D. The first email was from Finch, dated the day after Alice had presented Cassandra to him. It read, "The Rowe algorithm is the key. Her employment agreement gives us full ownership. Have Henderson's team reverse engineer it and integrate it into Prometheus immediately. Rebrand it, file the patents, and begin the termination process for Rowe. Keep it clean." A collective gasp went through the courtroom. It was a smoking gun. A confession in writing. Arthur Davies leaped to his feet shouting objections, but it was too late. The damage was done. The final email in the chain was even more damning. It was from the head of R&D to Finch. "There are some structural complexities. The girl's design is unconventional. We can replicate the function, but there are stability issues. It might be better to keep her on to supervise the integration." Finch's reply was a single chilling line, "Absolutely not. She knows what she built. She's a liability. Get it done and get her out. Manage the flaw in post-launch patches." The jury stared at Gregory Finch, their faces a mixture of shock and disgust. Finch for the first time looked truly terrified. He was no longer a powerful CEO. He was just a common thief exposed in a court of law. Judge Albright's face was like stone. "Mr. Finch," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, "I will be referring this evidence to the district attorney's office for investigation into potential perjury, wire fraud, and conspiracy." The final judgment was swift and brutal. The court ruled entirely in Alice Rowe's favor. She was awarded full ownership and all rights to the Cassandra algorithm. Innovatech was ordered to cease and desist from using any part of her code immediately. The judge awarded her $10 million in compensatory damages for lost income and career damage. Then, citing the malicious, willful, and predatory nature of Innovatech's actions, she added another $50 million in punitive damages. The gavel came down. It was over. A wave of pure, unadulterated vindication washed over Alice. It was so powerful she had to grip the table to keep from collapsing. She looked over at Eleanor Vance, who gave her a rare, small smile. She looked into the gallery and met Alistair Sterling's gaze. He gave her a slow, deliberate nod. It was a look of profound respect. She had won. She had not just been heard. She had been believed. The truth which had felt so small and fragile for so long had finally proven to be a sword. The aftermath of the verdict was chaos. As soon as the courtroom doors opened, a swarm of reporters and news cameras flooded the hallway. The story had leaked. A lone, self-representing woman bringing a tech giant to its knees was a modern-day David and Goliath tale. They surged forward, microphones and cameras thrust in Alice's face. "Ms. Rowe, how does it feel? What will you do with the money? Are you the next big name in tech?" The questions were a bewildering cacophony. The flashing lights were disorienting. Alice, who had just faced down a phalanx of corporate lawyers, felt a fresh wave of panic. This was a new kind of battleground, one she was completely unprepared for. Suddenly, a cordon of quiet professional men in dark suits formed around her. They moved with an unobtrusive efficiency, creating a calm space in the middle of the storm. A moment later, Alistair Sterling was by her side. "Let's get you out of here," he said, his voice a calm anchor in the noise. He placed a light guiding hand on her back, shielding her from the worst of the press scrum. Eleanor Vance and her team ran interference with Vance, crisply stating, "My client will be making no comment at this time." They moved as a unit through the throng of reporters, out of the courthouse, and onto the sun-drenched marble steps where Alice's journey had begun that first lonely morning. The world looked different now. Sharper. Brighter. A sleek, impossibly black Bentley limousine was idling at the curb, its tinted windows gleaming. A driver in a crisp uniform held the door open. The contrast was not lost on Alice. She had arrived on the subway wearing scuffed shoes and a suit she couldn't really afford. Now this. "The car is waiting," Alistair said, holding the door for her. There was no triumphant flourish, no gloating. His tone was practical, forward-looking. "I've taken the liberty of scheduling a meeting for 11 tomorrow, the first board meeting of what comes next." Alice paused before getting in, looking at him. "Board meeting? Of course," he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "You're the founder and CEO. I'm your first investor and board member. We have a company to build. We need to discuss server architecture for scaling Cassandra, a recruitment strategy for hiring a core engineering team, and a roadmap for the first 3 product verticals. We should probably hire a CFO before lunch." She looked from his intense, focused face to the waiting limousine. This was not the end of a story. It was the explosive beginning of a new one. The legal battle was just the prelude. The real work, the work of building, of creating, of changing the world with her ideas, was just starting. She slid into the cool leather interior of the car. It was silent inside, the chaos of the street instantly muted. The interior smelled of success. Alistair got in opposite her, and the door closed with a soft, satisfying thud. As the limousine pulled away from the curb, leaving the courthouse, and the flashing cameras behind Alice looked out the window, she saw her reflection superimposed over the blur of the city. She saw a woman who was no longer alone. no longer afraid. She had walked into that building with nothing but the contents of her own mind. She was leaving with the resources to turn those contents into a legacy. Alistair was already tapping away on a tablet, pulling up financial models and network diagrams. "I've been running some simulations," he said, his eyes alight with the same passion she felt when she was coding. "If we apply Cassandra to high-frequency commodities trading, the potential ROI is staggering. But I think the real value is in medical diagnostics. Imagine feeding it genetic markers and patient histories to predict disease onset." Alice listened, her own mind beginning to race to build on his ideas to see the future taking shape. The conversation wasn't romantic. It was something deeper, more exciting. It was a meeting of minds, a partnership forged in a crucible of injustice and sealed with mutual respect and boundless ambition. The limousine accelerated smoothly, merging into the endless river of New York City traffic. It was heading downtown towards the gleaming towers of the financial district, towards the future. Alice Rowe had arrived at court alone, a plaintiff with an impossible case. She left in a billionaire's limousine, a CEO, on her way to her first board meeting. The Bentley moved through the city's arteries with an unnerving smoothness, insulating its passengers from the chaotic symphony of horn sirens and rumbling subways that had been the soundtrack to Alice's life. They didn't head for the glass canyons of Wall Street, but for a newer, sleeker part of the city where technology and architecture merged into gleaming spires. The limousine pulled into a private underground entrance, and the world outside vanished. They ascended in a private elevator, a silent, brushed steel capsule that shot upwards with breathtaking speed. There were no buttons, only a biometric scanner that had lit up at Alistair's touch. For the 80 floors, neither of them spoke. Alice caught her reflection in the polished steel walls. The same charcoal suit, the same tired face, but the eyes were different. The fear was gone, replaced by a bewildering mix of exhaustion and a fierce, nascent energy. The woman in the reflection was a stranger she was just getting to know. The doors opened not into a lavish penthouse office, but into a space that felt more like a futuristic laboratory. It was a vast circular room at the apex of the building, encased in floor-to-ceiling smart glass that currently offered a staggering 360-degree panorama of New York City. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. The room was minimalist, a central work table that looked like a solid block of obsidian, a few discreetly humming server racks against one wall, and what appeared to be a whiteboard that spanned an entire curved section of the room. "My workshop," Alistair said, gesturing to the space. "Fewer distractions up here." He walked to the massive whiteboard, which flickered to life at his approach, revealing itself to be a high-resolution interactive screen. With a few gestures, he pulled up a complex flowchart. At the center was a box labeled Cassandra. "Right." He began all business. "The path of least resistance and fastest monetization is high-frequency trading. We can build a proprietary platform, license it to a handful of investment banks for 9 figures a year, and be profitable within 6 months. The market is hungry for even a 0.5% edge. You're offering them a 5% edge. They'll trample each other to get it." He began mapping it out, his fingers flying across the screen, creating new boxes and connecting them with lines of light. It was a brilliant, ruthlessly efficient plan. And it made Alice's stomach turn. She thought of the beauty of her code, the elegant logic she had spent years perfecting. To see its first and primary application be a tool to make the unimaginably rich even richer felt like a betrayal of its potential. It felt like a surrender. "No," she said. Alistair stopped, turning from the screen to face her. He wasn't annoyed, merely curious. He raised an eyebrow, inviting a challenge. "No. That can be a revenue stream," Alice clarified, stepping forward into the light of the screen. "An important one, but it can't be our mission. It can't be the first thing we do." "It's the most logical first step," he countered, though his tone was analytical, not dismissive. "It provides the capital base to fund everything else." "We already have a capital base," she said, gesturing to him. You are the capital base. We have the luxury of not having to chase the lowest hanging fruit. We can afford to make a statement. She looked from the flowchart on the screen to the sprawling city below them, a living organism of millions of people. In the car, you mentioned medical diagnostics, predicting disease. Let's start there. Her voice grew stronger, filled with the passion that had been stifled for so long. Let's feed Cassandra medical journals, patient data, genetic markers. Let's build a tool for doctors, not for traders. Let's start by building something that saves lives. That will be our legacy. That will attract the brightest, most passionate engineers in the world. People will fight to work for a company like that. The money will follow, but it won't be the reason we exist. She stood her ground, her heart pounding, half expecting him to dismiss her as a naive idealist. This was his world, his money, his tower. She was a guest here, a junior partner at best. Alistair looked at her for a long, silent moment. He studied her face, then glanced at the city beyond the glass as if seeing it through her eyes. He saw not a grid of assets and liabilities, but a landscape of human potential and frailty. He turned back to the screen. With a single decisive swipe of his hand, he erased the entire high-frequency trading flowchart. The screen went blank. Then with his finger he wrote 2 words at the very top: Project Nightingale. "All right, CEO Rowe." Alistair Sterling said, a rare, genuine smile touching his lips. He tossed her a light pen from the workstation. "You're the architect. Show me the blueprint." And so Alice Rowe's journey didn't end on the courthouse steps, it began there. Her story serves as a powerful reminder that the most valuable assets we possess are not in our bank accounts, but in our minds. It's a testament to the fact that integrity and intellect can be the most formidable weapons against even the most entrenched power. What happens when brilliance refuses to be silenced? What happens when one person's belief in themselves is finally matched by another's belief in them? You get a revolution. If this story of resilience, justice, and unexpected alliances resonated with you, please take a moment to hit the like button and share it with someone who might need a reminder of their own strength. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that prove truth is often more dramatic than fiction. Click that notification bell so you won't miss our next video. Thank you for listening.
What is the ultimate betrayal? Is it a lie? Is it infidelity? Or is it something so dark, so twisted it crawls from the buried past to shatter the present? For Amelia Hayes, a 34-year-old architect just hours away from becoming a mother, betrayal was supposed to be a distant concept. But as she gasped through contractions in a sterile Boston hospital room, her husband Marcus wasn't by her side. He was on a sun-drenched beach in Bali, celebrating a new beginning with his mistress. Amelia thought his infidelity was the deepest cut. She was wrong. The real secret wasn't on his phone. It was in her baby's blood. The fluorescent lights of the maternity ward at Massachusetts General Hospital hummed a monotonous, indifferent tune. It was a sound Amelia Hayes knew she would hate for the rest of her life. Each flicker of the long tube bulbs seemed to mock the frantic, primal rhythm of her own body. The contractions were tidal waves now cresting with blinding pain before receding just enough to let her gasp for air. Her knuckles were white as she gripped the bed rail. "Just breathe, Ames. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Like we practiced," a calm voice said beside her. It was Chloe Jenkins, her best friend, her maid of honor, and now her unwilling stand-in for a birthing partner. Chloe's fiery red hair was pulled back in a messy bun, her normally vibrant face etched with concern. She dabbed a cool cloth on Amelia's forehead. "Where is he, Chloe?" Amelia panted the words, catching in her throat between spasms. "He should be here." "I know, sweetie. I know." Chloe's eyes darted to the silent phone on the bedside table. They had tried calling Marcus Thorne, Amelia's husband, 12 times. Each call went straight to an international voicemail service. The last text he'd sent 12 hours ago was infuriatingly cheerful. Landing in Singapore soon for the final leg. This merger is a beast. Kiss the bump for me. I'll be on the first flight back, the second it's done. Love you. A beast of a merger. That's what Marcus, a golden boy venture capitalist, had called this last-minute, absolutely can't-miss trip to Asia. He'd been so apologetic, his handsome face a mask of regret. It's the final piece of the Atherton deal, Ames. It means we can buy the house in Beacon Hill. It means this baby will have everything. He had kissed her swollen belly, then her lips promising to be back long before her due date. But the baby had other plans. Her water had broken 3 weeks early. Another contraction ripped through her, a guttural cry escaping her lips. I can't do this without him, she sobbed, the pain mingling with a profound, aching loneliness. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. They had a plan. A meticulously curated, beautifully designed plan, much like the blueprints Amelia drew for a living. Marcus would hold her hand. He'd cut the cord. He'd be the first to hold their son. Yes, you can, Amelia, Chloe said, her voice firm. You are the strongest person I know. Marcus or no Marcus, you are having this baby. You are doing this. For the next 6 hours, Amelia drifted on an ocean of pain. The world shrank to the 4 walls of the delivery room, the encouraging words of the nurses and Chloe's steadfast presence. She pushed with a strength she didn't know she possessed, fueled by a primal need to meet the tiny person she'd carried for nearly 9 months. At 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, Oliver Hayes Thorne was born, screaming his way into the world. He was small, covered in vernix, but perfect. The nurse laid him on Amelia's chest, and in that instant the world stopped humming. The pain vanished. The anger at Marcus melted away, replaced by an overwhelming, all-consuming love that left her breathless. He's beautiful, Ames, Chloe whispered, tears streaming down her face. Absolutely perfect. Amelia stroked his downy hair, her own tears mingling with Chloe's. She looked at her son's tiny, wrinkled face and saw Marcus in the curve of his brow, her own father in the shape of his nose. He was theirs. She just wished Marcus was there to see it. Chloe took the first photos, sending them to Marcus's silent phone, along with a simple message, Oliver Hayes Thorne. 7. Albs 2 O's. Amelia and baby are healthy. Call us. Exhausted but wired. Amelia couldn't sleep. She just watched Oliver, his little chest rising and falling. Chloe had finally dozed off in the uncomfortable armchair in the corner. The quiet of the early morning felt sacred. Amelia picked up her own phone, intending to scroll through photos of her pregnancy to reminisce. She opened Instagram out of habit, and that's when her world, so recently expanded, with joy imploded. It wasn't a post from any of her friends. It was on the Explore page, an algorithm's cruel trick, a photo from a popular travel blogger she didn't even follow. The location tag read, Mulia Resort, Nusa Dua Bali. The picture was stunning. A white sand beach, a turquoise ocean, 2 champagne flutes held up against the sunset. And holding one of those flutes was her husband, Marcus. He was smiling that dazzling, confident smile that had first made her fall in love. His arm was wrapped tightly around a woman with long, flowing, dark hair. The woman was laughing, her head thrown back in carefree ecstasy. Amelia knew her instantly. Isabella Rossi, a freelance graphic designer his firm sometimes worked with. A woman Amelia had met a handful of times. A woman Marcus had always referred to as a talented kid. But it was the caption that delivered the final fatal blow, written by the woman Isabella, her profile public for the world to see. Celebrating new beginnings with the one who showed me what love really is. To our future, my love. #honeymoon for two. Bali bliss. Soulmate honeymoon. The word hung in the airless hospital room, a toxic vapor. A honeymoon, while she was in labor. The phone slipped from Amelia's numb fingers, clattering to the floor and jolting Chloe awake. Ames. What is it? What's wrong? Amelia couldn't speak. She could only point a trembling finger at the phone on the floor. Chloe picked it up, her eyes scanning the screen. The color drained from her face. Her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then to pure, unadulterated rage. That son of a bitch, Chloe breathed the words low and dangerous. That absolute monster. Amelia looked from the glowing screen to the sleeping baby on her chest. Oliver. Her son. The product of her love with a man who was celebrating a new life with someone else while she was bringing theirs into the world. The betrayal was so immense, so cinematic in its cruelty, it felt unreal. Her heart didn't just break, it atomized. In that moment, staring at the proof of her husband's monstrous deception, Amelia Hayes made a silent vow to the tiny, innocent life in her arms. She didn't know how, but she would protect him from this. She had to. She had no idea then that the man on the beach wasn't the only secret she'd have to protect her son from. The real danger was already there, hidden in Oliver's very DNA. The first few weeks were a blur of postpartum hormones, sleepless nights, and a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight on Amelia's chest. The beautiful nursery they had designed together felt like a mausoleum. Every tiny pair of sneakers, every lovingly chosen book was a testament to a future that had been a lie. Marcus had, of course, eventually called. His voice, when it finally crackled through the phone speaker 2 days later, was a frantic symphony of poorly constructed lies. Ames. Oh my God. I just got the messages. My phone died. The reception in the remote conference center was non-existent. A son. I have a son. Amelia, cradling a fussy Oliver, felt nothing. The man on the phone was a stranger. Don't, she said, her voice flat and cold. Don't you dare, Marcus. What are you talking about? I'm booking a flight right now. I'll be home in 30 hours. I saw the picture, Marcus. She cut him off. Bali, Isabella Rossi, your honeymoon. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. She could almost hear the gears turning in his head, calculating, recalibrating his deception. Amelia, that's not what it looks like, he finally stammered. It's a misunderstanding. Isabella, her father, is a potential investor. It was a business dinner, a celebration for the deal. She's just dramatic, you know how these artistic types are. Honeymoon is just a silly inside joke. It was the weakness of the lie, the sheer insulting transparency of it, that solidified her resolve. He didn't even respect her enough to craft a believable fiction. I have a son to take care of, Amelia said, her voice devoid of emotion. My lawyer will be in touch with yours. She hung up before he could respond, her hand shaking, not with sadness, but with a cold, clear rage. Life settled into a new, painful rhythm. Chloe was a rock her parents flew in from Chicago to help, and Amelia focused every ounce of her being on Oliver. He was a quiet baby, but beautiful. He had her blue eyes and Marcus's dark curly hair. Yet as the weeks turned into a month, then two, a small nagging worry began to grow in the back of Amelia's mind. Oliver wasn't hitting the typical milestones. He was lethargic. His muscle tone seemed weak, and he had trouble feeding. He was constantly fussy, a low-grade whimper that signaled a discomfort he couldn't articulate. Her pediatrician initially brushed it off. "Babies develop at their own pace," she'd said kindly. But at his 3-month checkup, even the doctor couldn't ignore the signs. Oliver had gained very little weight, and his liver felt slightly enlarged upon examination. A cloud of concern passed over the doctor's face. "I want to run some blood panels," she said, her tone suddenly serious. "Just to be thorough." The week that followed was the longest of Amelia's life. The joy of new motherhood was completely eclipsed by a gnawing, terrifying fear. Finally, the call came. The pediatrician asked her to come in and to bring someone with her. Amelia knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that it was bad news. Chloe came with her, holding her hand in the sterile-smelling waiting room. Dr. Anya Sharma, a pediatric geneticist with kind eyes and a somber demeanor, sat across from them in a small windowless office. She laid out a series of charts and papers. "Amelia," she began gently, "Oliver's blood work showed some significant anomalies. We ran a full genetic sequencing panel to be sure. Your son has been diagnosed with a rare genetic condition. It's a type of lysosomal storage disorder, specifically a mutation we refer to as glycogen storage disease, type 11. Amelia stared at her. The words were a jumble of medical jargon. What does that mean?" "It means his body lacks a specific enzyme needed to break down complex molecules," Dr. Sharma explained patiently. "These molecules build up in his cells, particularly in the liver muscles and heart. It's what's causing his poor muscle tone, the enlarged liver, and his difficulty feeding." "Is there a cure?" Chloe asked, ever the practical one. Dr. Sharma shook her head slowly. "There is no cure at present, but there are treatments. Enzyme replacement therapy, dietary management. It can manage the symptoms and improve his quality of life significantly. It's a serious chronic condition, Amelia. It will require lifelong care." Amelia felt the floor drop out from under her. Her perfect baby. Her sweet Oliver. He was sick. And it was permanent. Tears streamed down her face, silent and hot. "How?" she whispered. "How did this happen?" Dr. Sharma's expression softened with sympathy. "This is an autosomal recessive disorder," she said, pointing to a diagram of gene pairs. "That means for a child to have it, they must inherit one copy of the mutated gene from their mother and one copy from their father. Both parents must be carriers of the recessive gene." A carrier. The word echoed in Amelia's mind. She and Marcus. They had done this to him. This perfect storm of unlucky genetics. "We need to test you and his father," Dr. Sharma continued. "It's important for future family planning and for understanding the specific mutation Oliver has." "I'll do it right now," Amelia said immediately. A nurse drew her blood. Getting Marcus's sample would be a legal matter, but a necessary one. A week later, Amelia was back in Dr. Sharma's office. This time, she was alone. "Well, we have your results," Dr. Sharma said, looking at a file. She paused, her brow furrowed in a way that set off alarm bells in Amelia's head. "This is unusual." "What is it?" "Amelia, your genetic test came back completely clear. You are not a carrier for GSD type 11. You do not have the recessive gene." Amelia stared at her confused. But you said both parents have to be carriers, so maybe the test was wrong. These tests are over 99.9% accurate. Dr. Sharma said, her voice steady. We even ran it twice to be sure. You are not a carrier. The implication hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Dr. Sharma, a professional, wouldn't say it. She didn't have to. If Oliver had the disease, he needed 2 copies of the gene. If Amelia didn't have one to give, then... So what you're saying, Amelia said slowly, the world tilting on its axis, is that if I'm not a carrier, it's medically impossible for Oliver to have this disease, if Marcus is his father. Dr. Sharma held her gaze, her expression one of deep compassion. From a genetic standpoint, she said carefully, for Oliver to have an autosomal recessive condition, he must have inherited a faulty gene from both of his biological parents. Amelia's mind reeled. It was an accusation delivered in the sterile language of science. The doctor was telling her that Marcus couldn't be the father. But that was impossible. She had never been with anyone else. Not once. She had been completely, foolishly faithful to the man who was vacationing with his mistress in Bali. She was trapped in a logical nightmare. Oliver was sick. The sickness required 2 carrier parents. She was not a carrier. Therefore, Marcus must be a carrier, and the biological father must be some other carrier. But Marcus was the biological father. She knew it with every fiber of her being. So what was the truth? Was her knowledge of her own life a lie? Or was there another secret, something buried even deeper than infidelity, hiding in the double helix of her husband's DNA? The question sent a shiver of pure dread down her spine. The betrayal in Bali was a simple, ugly story. This was a medical impossibility, a secret that science itself was trying to tell her. The doctor's words became a maddening loop in Amelia's mind. Impossible. Medically impossible. For days, she existed in a fog, caring for Oliver on autopilot, her thoughts churning. She felt like she was losing her grip on reality. Could a person be so traumatized they created false memories? Had there been a night, a moment she had completely blocked out? The very idea felt like a violation of her own soul. No, it wasn't possible. The foundation of her world might be shattered, but she knew her own history. Marcus was Oliver's father. This left only one other possibility. However remote, the science was wrong in a way they didn't understand. Or more accurately, they were missing a piece of the puzzle. She confided in Chloe one evening over a bottle of wine after Oliver was finally asleep. She laid out the entire medical paradox. So the doctor is basically telling you that you cheated, Chloe said, her voice laced with fury on Amelia's behalf, while you were married to that cheating scumbag. The irony would be hilarious if it wasn't so horrific. I didn't, Chloe. You know I didn't. Of course you didn't, Chloe said, immediately reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. Which means there's something else going on. Something about Marcus. Marcus. Everything always came back to Marcus. After their one explosive phone call, all communication had gone through lawyers. He was fighting her on everything, the divorce settlement, alimony, even demanding partial custody of a son he hadn't met, all while his Instagram-famous honeymoon continued. His lawyers were painting Amelia as unstable and vindictive. They sent a request for a court-ordered paternity test, a move designed to humiliate her. Amelia's lawyer told her to accept. Let him prove it himself, she'd advised. It will only strengthen our case that he's the father and abandoned you. The test was arranged. A sample was collected from Oliver and Marcus, now back in the States and living in a sleek downtown apartment, submitted his own. The waiting period was agonizing. Amelia found herself praying for the result she knew to be true, the result that would only deepen the medical mystery. The letter from the lab arrived on a crisp autumn morning. With trembling hands, she tore it open. Probability of paternity 99.999%. Marcus Thorne was without a shadow of a scientific doubt Oliver's father. Relief washed over her, followed immediately by utter bewilderment. She called Dr. Sharma's office and relayed the information. The geneticist was silent for a moment. "That complicates things, Amelia," she finally said. "It presents a genetic contradiction I have not encountered in my career. There is one highly improbable theory, but it's pure speculation without more information." "What is it?" Amelia pressed. "It's a concept called uniparental disomy, where a child inherits 2 copies of a chromosome from one parent and none from the other. It's incredibly rare. The only other explanation is that there's a novel mutation, something specific to your husband's family line that we don't have on record." Marcus's family. A family as opaque and distant as Marcus himself had become. His mother, Eleanor, had died when he was a teenager. A boating accident, he'd said. His father, Richard Thorne, was a formidable old-money patriarch, a man who moved in circles of power and privilege far removed from Amelia's world. He had remarried years ago and had a tense, formal relationship with his only son. Richard had never approved of Amelia seeing her as beneath their station. "I need to look into his family," Amelia said to Chloe that night, a new determination in her voice. "There's a secret there. There has to be." Chloe, ever the pragmatist, cracked her knuckles. "Okay, let's do this. Richard Thorne. What do we know?" The digging began. They started with the obvious public records business. Filings, society pages from the Boston Globe archives. Richard Thorne was the CEO of Thorne Investments, a company built on old steel money and now a powerhouse in real estate and private equity. He was ruthless, successful, and intensely private. Amelia's architect mind, trained to see patterns and structures, started to piece together a timeline. She pulled out the old photo albums from her and Marcus's courtship. There were so few pictures of his mother. When Amelia had asked, Marcus had been evasive. "My father got rid of most of her things after she died. It was too painful." She found one faded photograph of a young Marcus with his parents. Richard stiff and imposing. Elena, his mother, was stunningly beautiful. She had dark hair, almost black, and striking, slightly tilted eyes. She looked vibrant, full of life. It was hard to imagine her gone. Then Chloe found the first real crack. While scouring old business articles from the early 90s, she uncovered a story about a major real estate deal Richard Thorne had orchestrated the acquisition of a waterfront property in the North End. The article mentioned his primary rival in the deal, a man named Lorenzo Rossi, head of a successful Italian import-export business. The deal had been famously hostile, with Rossi accusing Thorne of unethical tactics. Rossi. The name jolted Amelia. Isabella's last name. "It's got to be a coincidence, right?" Amelia said, her heart starting to beat faster. "Boston has a large Italian-American community." "Maybe," Chloe said, her fingers flying across her keyboard. "Let's find out." It didn't take long. They found Isabella Rossi's professional design portfolio online. In her bio, she mentioned her father, Lorenzo Rossi, as her inspiration. The connection was real. Marcus's father and his mistress's father were old business enemies. Was that it? Was the affair some kind of twisted, multi-generational revenge plot? It felt dramatic, but thin. The real breakthrough came from a place Amelia least expected it. She was looking at Isabella's public Facebook profile, scrolling back years, looking for any connection to Marcus that predated their official work relationship. She went back through years of party photos and design projects. And then she found it. A family album from 2015 titled La Familia. There were photos of Isabella with her father Lorenzo. There were photos of her with brothers and cousins. And there was a photo of her with her mother, a graceful, elegant woman named Sofia Rossi. Amelia froze, zooming in on the picture. Sofia Rossi. She had the same dark hair as her daughter, the same elegant bone structure, but it was her eyes, striking, slightly tilted eyes. They were hauntingly familiar. Amelia's blood ran cold. She scrambled for her own photo album for the one faded picture of Marcus's mother. She placed her phone screen next to the old photograph. Sofia Rossi and Elena Thorne were not just similar. Allowing for the 20-year age difference between the photos, they could have been sisters. The resemblance was uncanny, undeniable. What did it mean? How could Marcus's dead mother look exactly like his mistress's living one? It was another impossibility, another contradiction that made Amelia's head spin. She felt like she was standing at the edge of a chasm, and the ground was crumbling beneath her feet. The secret wasn't just about a gene. It was about a face that had been in two places at once. The image of the two women became an obsession, an unsolvable Rubik's Cube in Amelia's mind. It was more than a resemblance. It was a replication. She and Chloe spent an entire evening with the images projected onto her living room wall, the faded photograph of Elena Thorne beside the crisp digital image of Sofia Rossi. They sat on the floor like detectives in a cold case, surrounded by takeout containers and a shared sense of creeping dread. "Look at the epicanthic fold," Amelia murmured, tracing the unique shape of the women's eyes with a laser pointer. As an architect, she had a mind for spatial relationships, for the precise angles and curves that create a structure. She was now applying that same forensic analysis to a human face. It's identical. And the philtrum, the groove above the lip, has the exact same depth and curve. Those are like fingerprints. They don't just happen. Okay, so they're not just similar. They're twins, Chloe reasoned, trying to fit the anomaly into a logical box. Separated at birth, one marries a tycoon, the other marries his rival. It's the plot of a 1980s miniseries, but it's possible. But it doesn't feel right, Amelia countered, shaking her head. Why would Richard Thorne, a man obsessed with image and control, allow such a coincidence to exist so close to him? Why would Marcus's mother have an identical twin sister married to his father's sworn enemy? And no one ever mentioned it. The mystery deepened as they delved into the official records. Elena Thorne's past was a fortress. Born Elena Petridis in Greece, she came to the US for university, married Richard, and then ceased to exist in May 1995. Her records were impeccably clean, sealed by a death certificate that cited accidental drowning. There were no loose threads, no questionable details. It was too perfect, as if scrubbed clean by an expert hand. Sofia Rossi, however, was another story. Her life began, at least on paper, where Elena's ended. Chloe's legal database access unearthed a treasure trove of information. Sofia Petridis, sharing the same maiden name as Elena, had applied for a new social security number in late 1995, citing lost documents in a house fire. She married Lorenzo Rossi in June of 1996, and sandwiched between those two events was the birth of her daughter Isabella in March 1996. "Look at this timeline," Ames Chloe said, pointing to the screen. Elena dies in May 95. Sophia gets a new identity a few months later. Isabella is born 10 months after Elena's death. Sophia marries Lorenzo 3 months after that. It's impossibly tight. It's the timeline of someone starting a new life in a hurry. The puzzle was maddening, full of pieces that hinted at a larger, more sinister picture. But it was all circumstantial, ghostly evidence. Amelia knew she needed something concrete, something that couldn't be explained away as coincidence. Driven by a cold, desperate intuition, she made a pivotal decision. She took a significant portion of her dwindling savings and hired a forensic accountant, a discreet professional with a reputation for unearthing secrets the wealthy paid millions to hide. While she waited for his report, the official custody battle with Marcus began. His lawyers were ruthless, painting her as an emotionally unstable, grieving woman lashing out. They filed motion after motion, burying her in paperwork. It was a war of attrition, designed to wear her down. But every time she felt her resolve weaken, she would look at Oliver at the daily struggle written on his small features, and her determination would harden like steel. The accountant's report arrived via encrypted email 2 weeks later. It was a dry, numbers-driven document, but to Amelia it read like a confession written in blood. The report detailed a complex web of offshore accounts and blind trusts. The centerpiece was the Thorne Legacy Trust, established 15 years prior. The accountant had traced the funding of this trust directly to Marcus's personal investment accounts. Every quarter, a significant percentage of his earnings was funneled into this trust, and the sole unchangeable beneficiary was not his future children, not a charity, but his father, Richard Thorne. "It makes no sense," Chloe said, reading over Amelia's shoulder. "It's reverse inheritance. The son is paying the tycoon father millions of dollars over 15 years. Why? It's not a gift," Amelia said, a chilling certainty dawning on her. "It's a leash. It's the price of a secret so big that Richard made his own son pay to maintain it without even telling him what it was." This was it, the concrete proof, the undeniable evidence of a long-term, high-stakes conspiracy. Armed with it, Amelia knew she could no longer fight this war through lawyers and motions. She had to face the monster in his lair. She picked up the phone and called the main line of Thorne Investments, her voice a paradigm of calm she did not feel. "I'd like to schedule a meeting with Mr. Richard Thorne," she said. "Tell him it's regarding his grandson." The offices of Thorne Investments were designed to intimidate. Located on the top floor of a skyscraper overlooking the Boston Harbor, the space was a symphony of dark mahogany, polished brass, and cold marble. The silence was heavy, broken only by the whisper of expensive shoes on priceless rugs. Richard Thorne sat behind a desk the size of a small car, a portrait of absolute power. He did not rise when she entered. "Miss Hayes," he began the name a deliberate insult. "I've allotted you 10 minutes. I trust you'll be brief." Amelia walked to his desk and sat uninvited in the leather chair opposite him. She placed a file on the gleaming wood between them. "My son, your grandson has a severe genetic disorder, Richard." He waved a dismissive hand. "A tragedy, yes," Marcus informed me. "Rest assured the child will want for nothing. The best care is a given. His care isn't the issue. His genetics are," she said, her gaze locked on his. She explained the science of autosomal recessive inheritance, her voice steady and clinical. "Both parents must be carriers. I am not a carrier. Yet a legally binding paternity test has proven that Marcus is without question Oliver's father. She watched him carefully. A lesser man might have shown confusion. Richard Thorne merely steepened his fingers, his expression one of bored indifference, but a tiny muscle in his jaw twitched a single telltale sign of tension. "I'm sure the doctors have their theories," he said, his voice smooth as glass. "Genetic science is always discovering new anomalies." "They are," Amelia agreed. "And I have one of my own." She slid the accountant's summary across the desk. "Marcus has been paying you millions of dollars for 15 years. Why? What secret is worth that much? That much, Richard. A secret you keep even from him." His composure finally began to fray, his eyes cold and grey as the Boston Sea narrowed. "You are wading into matters that are of no concern to you. This is a private family financial arrangement. It stopped being private when it started affecting my son's health," she retorted, her voice gaining an edge. Now was the moment. She took her phone from her purse, called up the side-by-side images of Elena and Sophia, and placed it firmly on the desk in front of him. "I think this is the secret you've been protecting. Or should I say, her." The effect was instantaneous and profound. Richard Thorne looked at the screen, and for a split second, the mask of the ruthless patriarch fell away. In his eyes, Amelia saw a flicker of something ancient, a memory, a loss, a ghost. It was immediately replaced by sheer, undiluted panic. His face turned a deep, mottled red. "What is this?" he hissed, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "It's your late wife, Elena," Amelia said. "And it's also Isabella Rossi's mother, Sophia. The resemblance is impossible, isn't it? Unless it's not a resemblance at all." He stared at her, his mind clearly racing, searching for an escape route where there was none. He saw the full scope of her knowledge in her unblinking eyes. He was cornered, and like any cornered animal, he lashed out. With a roar of pure rage, he shot to his feet and swept his arm across the desk, sending her phone, the files, and a crystal glass of water crashing to the floor. "Get out!" he bellowed, his voice echoing through the cavernous office. "Get out of here now! You have no idea what you're meddling in. I have spent a lifetime protecting my son." From this, security guards appeared at the door, but Amelia was already on her feet, her heart hammering not with fear, but with the electrifying certainty of the truth. He hadn't denied it. He hadn't called her crazy. He had confirmed everything with his rage. He had talked about protecting Marcus as she walked out of that opulent office, leaving the powerful Richard Thorne sputtering in a mess of his own making, she knew. Back in her own living room, Chloe listened pale and rapt as Amelia recounted the meeting. "He didn't say I was wrong, Chloe," Amelia said, pacing the floor, her mind on fire. "He told me I was meddling. He wasn't protecting a memory. He was protecting a living, breathing secret." The pieces which had been scattered and confusing now flew together with magnetic force, forming a single horrifying image. "The boating accident," Amelia whispered, stopping dead in her tracks. No body was ever found. What if it wasn't an accident? What if it was an exit strategy? She laid it all out for Chloe, the theory forming on her lips as she spoke it. Elena, trapped in her marriage, had an affair with Lorenzo Rossi. She became pregnant. For a man like Richard Thorne, the public humiliation would be worse than death. So he orchestrated one. He erased Elena Thorne from existence and created Sophia Rossi, giving her to his rival. It was the ultimate act of psychological warfare, a way to control them both forever with their shared secret. And he left his own son Marcus to grieve for a mother who was very much alive. The final piece clicked into place with a sickening thud. Isabella Amelia breathed her blood running cold. She's Elena's daughter. That makes her Marcus's half-sister. The room spun. The affair in Bali, the honeymoon, the carefree pictures, it was all cast in a hideous new light. And Oliver, her beautiful, innocent son. His illness wasn't a freak of nature or a medical paradox. It was the logical, biological consequence of a union between a brother and sister who shared a mother, and a mother who carried a cursed gene. Oliver's diagnosis was the family's darkest secret, written in his very blood. The truth, once she possessed it, was a living entity in Amelia's home. It coiled in the corners of the nursery, its shadow falling across Oliver's crib. It hissed in the quiet moments between his pained whimpers and the hum of the feeding pump that had become a permanent fixture in their lives. For 3 days, Amelia lived with this toxic guest, paralyzed by its terrible weight. Every option felt like a betrayal. To stay silent was to dishonor the truth of her son's existence, to potentially compromise his long-term medical care, which depended on a complete genetic picture. To speak it aloud felt like detonating a bomb in the center of her own child's life, branding him forever with a story of tragedy and taboo. She found herself watching Marcus's life from afar, a ghost haunting the edges of his social media. He was back in Boston, photographed at galas, his smile as bright and empty as ever. He was a man performing a life utterly oblivious to the fact that his very identity was a carefully constructed fiction. A part of her, a dark and wounded part, wanted to see that smile shatter. But then she would look at Oliver. Her son was her entire world, a fragile planet she desperately tried to keep spinning. One afternoon, while struggling to get him to take a new medication, he looked at her, his blue eyes cloudy with discomfort, and let out a soft, sighing cry. It wasn't a cry of anger, but of exhaustion. It was the sound of a tiny body fighting a war it didn't understand. In that moment, the debate in Amelia's soul ended. This was not about revenge. It was not about punishing Marcus or destroying Richard Thorne. It was about Oliver. He deserved a life free of secrets that could harm him. He deserved every possible medical advantage, and the truth, no matter how monstrous, was now a medical necessity. Her fury, which had been a wild, chaotic fire, now cooled and hardened into something else, a tool, sharp, precise, and purposeful. She called Chloe. "He's coming tomorrow with his lawyer to talk about custody," Amelia said, her voice devoid of any tremor. "I need you here." The next afternoon, the house was still. Amelia had prepared the living room as if it were a stage. On the coffee table, a single thick file folder sat stark against the dark wood. Chloe was in the armchair in the corner, a silent sentinel, her presence a source of immense strength. When the doorbell rang, Amelia's heart gave a single hard thud, and then settled into a preternatural calm. Marcus strode in, bringing the scent of expensive cologne and the brisk air of the outside world with him. He was dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, looking every bit the magnate, a man accustomed to getting his way. Behind him was his lawyer, a silver-haired man named Peterson, whose face was set in a firm, no-nonsense expression. They saw this as a simple negotiation, a matter of assets and visitation schedules. "Amelia," Marcus began, his tone condescendingly gentle. "I'm glad we can finally sit down and be civil about this. We need to work out a schedule for Oliver. I want to be a father to him." The sheer audacity of the statement after everything nearly made her laugh. "Sit down, Marcus," she said, gesturing to the sofa opposite her. They sat arranging themselves with an air of professional patience. Peterson opened his briefcase. "My client is prepared to be very generous, Amelia, but he is firm on his request for joint physical custody." "Before we discuss custody," Amelia said, her voice cutting through the lawyer's spiel, "we need to talk about Oliver's health, his real health. And to do that, we have to talk about your family." Marcus let out an impatient sigh. "Amelia, I've already told you my family's resources will be at his disposal. We've been over this. What more is there to say?" "Everything," she repeated softly. She leaned forward and pushed the thick folder across the table toward them. "This is Oliver's complete medical file. I suggest you look at it." Peterson, the lawyer, picked it up. His professional curiosity piqued. Marcus just watched, annoyed. The lawyer began to flip through the pages, his brow furrowing slightly as he read the diagnosis. Glycogen storage disease, type 11. Autosomal recessive. He scanned the dense medical language, the prognosis, the litany of symptoms. "And this," Amelia continued, sliding another document out from her side of the table. "This is my genetic report. As you can see, I am not a carrier for the recessive gene." Peterson's eyes darted from one report to the other. He looked up at Amelia, then at Marcus. "I'm not a doctor, but I understand the basics. If Mrs. Thorne—" "Hayes," Amelia corrected him coldly. "My name is Amelia Hayes." "If Ms. Hayes is not a carrier," the lawyer amended, "then it would be genetically impossible for Mr. Thorne to be the father." He looked at Marcus, a silent question in his eyes. Marcus finally scoffed, a smirk playing on his lips. "Oh, I see where this is going. This is your angle, Ames, to try and claim the baby isn't mine to get more money. We already did the paternity test, remember? It's done. I'm the father." He said it with a flourish, as if laying down a winning card. "Yes, you are." Amelia agreed, her calmness unnerving him. The test confirmed it with 99.999% certainty, which creates a paradox, doesn't it? A medical impossibility. She let the words hang in the air. An impossibility that is, unless there's a factor you haven't considered, a factor that dramatically increases the probability of a rare recessive disease. She looked him dead in the eye. "Such as consanguinity. The doctors asked me if there was any chance the father and I were related." A humorless laugh escaped Marcus's lips. "This is insane. You're insane." Amelia ignored him. Her movements were deliberate as she pulled 2 photographs from the file and placed them side by side on the table. One was the faded picture of a young, vibrant Elena Thorne. The other was a crisp, recent printout of Sophia Rossi, Isabella's mother. "Do you know who this is, Marcus?" she asked, pointing to the photo of Sophia. "Of course," he said, irritated. "It's Isabella's mother. I've met her. What's your point? That she has dark hair, like my mother did." "My point," Amelia said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "is that they are not 2 women who look alike. They are the same woman." Marcus stared at the photos. The lawyer leaned in his professional mask, slipping into one of pure, stunned confusion. For the first time, Marcus was truly looking. He saw the identical curve of the smile, the unique, slightly tilted shape of the eyes, the bone structure that time had not changed. The resemblance was absolute, a ghost staring back at him. "That's not possible," he breathed, shaking his head. "My mother died. She's dead." "Is she?" Amelia pressed her voice relentless. She then laid out the final pieces of her devastating puzzle. The timeline: Elena's death in May 1995. Isabella's birth in March 1996. The marriage of Sophia to Lorenzo Rossi 3 months later. And finally, she produced the summary from the forensic accountant. For 15 years, you have been paying a significant portion of your income into an offshore trust for your father. Why, Marcus, your father is wealthier than you'll ever be. It wasn't support. It was payment. Hush money for a secret so profound he didn't even trust you with it. He let you pay to bury your own mother alive. Peterson, the lawyer, was now pale, staring at the financial statement. This was beyond a messy divorce. This was a conspiracy of staggering proportions. Amelia leaned forward, her voice the only sound in the suffocating silence. She was going to connect the dots for him to draw the final ugly line. Your mother, Elena, didn't die. She had an affair with your father's rival, Lorenzo Rossi. She got pregnant. To avoid the scandal, your father faked her death and allowed her to start a new life as Sophia Rossi. The daughter she was pregnant with was Isabella. Your Isabella. She paused, letting the weight of the name sink in. The rare gene for Oliver's disease. She continued, her voice clinical and precise. It came from your mother. She was a carrier. She gave one copy to you, her first child, and she gave another copy to Isabella, her second child. The reason Oliver is sick, Marcus, she said, delivering the final catastrophic blow, is because his parents are half-siblings. The world stopped. The sound of the word siblings seemed to suck all the air from the room. Marcus's face, which had been a canvas of confusion and denial, was now utterly blank. The tan he'd acquired in Bali was gone, replaced by a ghostly, waxy pallor. His mouth opened a silent scream, but no sound emerged. He looked at the photos, at the medical reports, at Amelia's pitiless, steady gaze. The architecture of his entire life, of his very being, crumbled to dust in that single moment. His grief for his mother was a lie. His affair was not a passionate transgression, but an unwitting, incestuous reunion. No, he finally whispered the word, a fragile, cracking thing. No, no. My father. He wouldn't. His denial was a prayer against a truth that was already consuming him. Call him, Amelia commanded, her voice like steel. Put him on speaker. With hands that shook so violently he could barely operate his phone, Marcus dialed the number. Chloe watched her face, a mask of grim vindication. Peterson, the lawyer, looked like he wanted to crawl out of his own skin. The phone rang once, twice. Marcus! Richard Thorne's formidable voice boomed through the speaker, laced with impatience. I'm in a meeting. Marcus couldn't form a sentence. He was choking on the question. He finally managed to force the words out his voice, the broken plea of a lost child. Is my mother alive? On the other end of the line, there was a dead, damning silence. It stretched for an eternity. In that quiet, Marcus's last shred of hope died. When Richard Thorne finally spoke, his voice was not for his son. It was a low, venomous growl directed across the city at Amelia herself. You've done this, he hissed. You foolish, meddling girl. You've destroyed everything. The line went dead. The click of the phone hanging up was like the sound of a guillotine. It was the only confirmation Marcus needed. He shattered. A sound tore from his throat that was barely human. A howl of such agony and despair that it made Chloe flinch. He collapsed forward, his head in his hands, his body racked with violent, soul-deep sobs. He was weeping not just for his lies, but for the lies that had been his entire life. The aftermath was an avalanche. The scandal was too immense, too shocking to be contained. Peterson, in a desperate act of self-preservation, distanced himself from the Thorne family, and the story bled into the press. It became a media firestorm, a modern-day Greek tragedy played out in the headlines of the Boston Globe and the New York Post. Richard Thorne's empire, built on secrets and steel, became toxic overnight. He was ruined a recluse in his own mansion. Isabella Rossi, along with her mother, Elena Sophia, vanished, swallowed by the European continent, seeking anonymity from a truth that had made them infamous. Amelia got everything. The divorce was a formality. She had full, uncontested custody of Oliver the Beacon Hill house they were once supposed to buy, and a financial settlement that would secure Oliver's medical future for the rest of his life. But there was no victory lap, no feeling of triumph. There was only the quiet, somber work of putting the pieces of her life back together. Her world became small and sacred. It was the rhythm of Oliver's treatments, the warmth of Chloe's friendship, the peaceful solitude of her home. The noise of the scandal faded into the background. She began to draw again, not for clients, but for herself, designing fantastical, impossible structures that obeyed their own logic. She was rebuilding. One evening, holding a sleeping Oliver against her chest, she looked down at his peaceful face. He was not a secret. He was not a tragedy. He was simply her son. In the ashes of Marcus Thorne's world, Amelia Hayes had been forged anew. She had walked through the darkest betrayal imaginable and emerged not as a victim, but as a creator, a protector, a mother. And in that hard-won peace, she finally found her new beginning. Amelia's story is a harrowing journey into the heart of deception. It shows us that the most devastating secrets are often not the ones whispered between lovers, but the ones buried in families, passed down through generations like a cursed inheritance. Her world was built on a lie so profound it rewrote biology itself. But her response was not to crumble. It was to fight, to investigate, to uncover the truth, no matter how ugly, for the sake of her child. This is a story about the destructive power of secrets, but it's also a powerful testament to a mother's love and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. It reminds us that even when our foundations are shattered, we have the strength to rebuild. If Amelia's story of survival and strength moved you, please show your support. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone you think needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more true life stories that will stay with you long after they're over. Thank you for listening.